All right. Rochelle, roll call?
Yes.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember Dan Hahn,
Present.
Councilmember Julia Stubble,
Present.
Councilmember Josh Hahn,
Present.
Council President Melinda Cox,
Present.
Mayor Monty Richardson. Let the record reflect that Mayor Richardson is not present.
Thank you. Okay, welcome. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out in this bitter cold. Goes from beautiful sunshine to bitter cold, but that's all right. We will start with mayor and council updates. And Josh Hahn, I'd like to start with you tonight.
Yeah, I just like to thank Lance and the streets department for getting on Main Street and making it a little more survivable this year. And you know, you guys are picking up side streets now. It's looking good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Hahn. Councilwoman Stup.
Thank you, Council President Cox. I have two updates tonight, one from the Lander Art District. As we move into the holiday season, the Lander Art District is teaming up with some downtown Lander merchants for a season of giving trees. These trees will be at Alchemy and will be the nonprofit that they're sponsoring or helping is Fremont County Alliance for Domestic Abuse. At Rebound, the Art of Repurposing to benefit Lander Performing Arts. Lander Bake Shop will be benefiting Pet Connection. Snow Deep Designs will be benefiting the Lander Art Center. And Welcome Home, Scott Robeson Custom Woodworking will benefit the Pet Connection also. So as we do our hopefully very, very local shopping for our dear residents and citizens here of Lander, keep in mind that you can stop by these 5 art-based businesses in the art district and help what's the word I want, support some of our local nonprofits who do great work as well. And then secondly, Councilwoman Cox, I attended the Paposia Conservation District meeting and they released their annual report, which I'm meant to bring updates from, and I do not have it on in my bag right now. So I'll bring those to our next meeting and share some of the successes of their last year, but it was great to read through and I imagine that's on their website as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Councilman Hahn. I think it would be a great opportunity for you to read it now. And then the folks that are presenting later will have an idea of maybe what some of your thoughts and information is.
All righty. To fully understand the properties of carbon footprint and greenhouse gases, you must look at all the information on this subject, not half of it. The groups coming at us are not even giving us half the available information we need to make a sound decision. You need the carbon footprint of the mining, manufacturing, transporting, installation of all renewable energy products, and look at all of the long-lasting and dangerous outcomes of the disposing of these toxic products, destroying precious ecosystems and freshwater basins. Yes, trashing the earth. They show you what they want to show you, not the whole picture. Here's some information you need to know. The dark side of electric vehicles. They run on dirty energy and the blood of children as young as 6 years old. Lawsuits are going on right now. Electric cars drive human rights abuse and child labor. There are over 20,000 slave labor workers in these big mines and over 1 million workers in the smaller mines, mining the ore for these batteries. Electric cars have electromagnetic radiation risks. They are a giant electromagnet. They don't talk about this. For every 1 ton of lithium mined, there's an average of 15 tons of CO2 emitted into the air. EV lithium ion batteries are classified as hazardous waste. They have to be recycled. And there's not that many places to recycle, which means you're not sure where they're going to go. By the year 2040, the US will have an estimated 26 billion pounds of dead EV batteries. To manufacture 1 EV battery, you have to dig up an average of 500,000 pounds of the Earth's crust up to 400 feet deep. Takes 25,000 pounds of brine of lithium, 30,000 pounds of ore for cobalt, 5,000 pounds of ore for nickel, 25,000 pounds of ore for copper, just to make one EV battery. The life of a battery is 8 to 10 years. Wind power. Despite billions of taxpayer subsidies pumped into the green energy industry, more than 15,000 windmills have been left to rot across the United States. 15,000. There's no money to remove them. Wind power is an expensive and inefficient power. 20 to 40% on the average. Typical lifespan is 20 years. They are not built unless they are subsidized. Just so you know, there's 70,800 across the United States right now. 8,000 blades are being buried a year because they can't be recycled. They're cutting them up. They're actually trucking them to Casper and they're burying them. They're made of epoxy resins and fiberglass. Yes, they're toxic. Solar panels, and I love solar. My wife and I, we have 2 complete systems. High upfront cost, efficiency is generally 15 to 20%. Key arguments against manufacturing solar panels is they require more energy and fossil fuel burning equipment to mine, manufacture, and transport than they save in their lifetime. They don't provide energy savings. It's all upfront where you have all the destruction. Some governments classify solar panels as hazardous waste because they have heavy metals. So there's a lot of information. This is just part of the information that I have. And the reason why I'm bringing this is I've been very interested in renewable energies for a long time, but there's a dark side and there's a carbon footprint up front that nobody ever talks about. And that is real. That is real. You can't just talk about the carbon footprint of, like having solar panels or whatever. You have to look at the whole picture. And a lot of people are turning a blind eye to this. And I've talked to a lot of people that are coming to us. And when I ask them about this, they really don't want to talk about it. So it's something. And so anyway, I wanted to bring that, and I hope people will take a look because the carbon footprint's there. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Hahn. Did you have any other updates for liaison or any of those types of things? Or are you good to move forward? You're good. Yeah. Okay. You're welcome. Councilwoman White.
Thank you, Council President. A few things. So kind of following along the lines of the Lander Arts District, a little bit different, but Lander Arts Center is going to be hosting art in the afternoon coming up on December 10th, which is a pretty significant economic development opportunity for the artists that presents, many of whom are local for that. The Senior Center, it has, now that they finished the pie sale for Thanksgiving, they are ramping up for their cookie fundraising. If you're interested in that, give them a call. It's 3 dozen for $40 or a dozen for $20. You need to order by December 14th. And also want to say, in our last meeting, we noted the challenges of an individual resident lander with their water bill. And the word went out on social media that this individual is having a tough time, and the opportunity for making donations was publicized. And as of this morning, $834 had been donated to this individual to offset their cost, which I think is really remarkable. That to me is the lander that we love and the lander that we are honored to serve. So thank you to all who have chipped in for that. Really appreciate that. And then as a reminder for that, and the note went out from the city that there is a service offering water line insurance that has not been vetted by the city. And but there is one that is. And Shari, if you could maybe in your updates remind us of those 2 entity names. I don't have them off the top of my head. So I would remind folks, if you have the means to get water line insurance and sewer insurance, that's a smart thing to do, but also make sure that who you're who you're getting that from is a reputable company for that. And that's it on my end. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Councilman Larson.
Yes, thank you. Just a few things here this evening. The last chamber meeting that I went to, they were talking very positively about trying to do some kind of candidate education process for individuals that's looking to run in any office, you know, statewide, city, county, whatever. And I guess there's been some information brought to the chamber in general, nationwide or whatever, and says, you know, this is some really good information to get out to people. And so they were very interested in that. And I thought that was a great plan to look at. They had talked about
It's gonna be good.
no, the developers have contractors, so on and so forth, have went to the chamber and just, you know, their hair's on fire because the what am I trying to think of? I'll get it here in a second. Anyway, the process of getting permits and all that has went from 0 to 60 in just mega seconds. And they're saying, geez, you know, we was kind of hoping that wasn't going to go quite so quick. And I reminded them that you know, that was one of the hazards that we talked about, you know, when we were discussing those ordinances. And so anyway, you know, they're still in the recovery or the shock mode, I guess, of dealing with the code enforcement. But you know, I think that give it another year and life will be good and everybody will be tooling along there and just used to it. I don't think anything else there. Oh yeah. Chief, I've always been really curious, you know, as to how your e-tickets were doing. I got firsthand information. I'm proud to say, you know, that our boys in blue, they do a great job. And when I was pulled over, it was the last council meeting. After the meeting, we had one more meeting, and so my eyes were starting to float there just a little bit. So I must have got a little carried away coming down Main Street. He pulled me over and let me know, you know, that that wasn't quite appropriate. And he says, but I'll be just a minute here. Give me your license and I'll be right back. And if it had been the 10 or 15 minutes, I don't know that I made it. But with the e-ticket, Chief, we got through her without having a wreck. And so just want to say that that those are working well. And I think that's it.
Thank you. We can always count on Councilman Larson for some entertainment, our council meetings. So thank you for that. Just a couple of updates. Lita will be presenting tonight recommendations and then planning moving forward. So I appreciate them being here, and it will couple with another presentation that we'll have by Mr. Kirschnisnik. And so I think those things will play nicely together. By way of School District 1, they finished their turkey baskets. They do a great job. And I think I said that the sophomores would win the food drive, and they did. And so I was happy to see that. And I think aside from that, we'll have some discussions. Lance will bring up just thank you for doing that, talking about snow removal. It's always a hot topic, especially when we have a lot of snow. So that will happen this evening as well, and we will move on to staff reports. Chief, if you'll start us off.
I don't have anything unless you have questions.
Does any of the council have questions? Thank you, Chief. All right, Lance.
Yes, Mayor and Council, thank you. So we'll jump into snow, if that's the hot topic you want to talk about. So, we got hit with a lot more snow than projected going into Thanksgiving, and on Thanksgiving Day ended up with the record snowfall that we were hoping we wouldn't get. So, we prepare for what the weather forecasts and try to have more people on hand when we need them. This one got us a little bit more when we were thinking 8 inches of being 28 inches. Our blades were running, but they'd hit those high priority routes first. So we're trying to get the hospital open. We're trying to get Main Street open, and all the emergency routes and other places we are. And then we focus on school routes and, those priorities on the map. So that's all still the same from last year. Trying to get those things done. We aren't picking up snow until we have a mechanic and full crews available and enough people to do that. So you saw the windrows remaining out there in Main Street was a bit of a mess. And then coming back once we have crews, that's when we tackle Main Street. We're trying to make windrows that are manageable. That's a lot of the questions. People are like, well, why aren't you grabbing the full street? We have a certain width that works with one pass of our snow blower, and then we can come back and do a cleanup. And that works much better for us than backing up or leaving excess. All the ice underneath has been difficult for us in this storm because we got the rain, the melt at the start of it, and then you've got the ruts underneath it. So we're trying to break loose all that ice as well at this point in time. So it's not a standard puffy storm of 28 inches where we can just windrow it. It's a lot of passes and trying to get this up. So right now, town's in a condition where we're trying to manage the slick spots as best as possible. Tomorrow we know Second Street's been a huge issue for us. Lots of wrecks, lots of issues. We've been sanding it hourly, out there trying to get traction, and we just haven't gained it. So getting our blades down is what we need to do, and we'll keep working through that process. So we run 1 to 2 shifts of running the blades. We bring people in on Thanksgiving. I think it was from 11 in the morning until 11 the next day. So 12-hour shifts, trying to get ahead of the storm and keep up with it. But we also have other operators who will jump in that machine if it doesn't need maintenance. So you're wearing down the blades, you're doing other things as you're doing this. And sometimes the equipment's got to go in the shop for a little bit and just get tuned back up and ready to go. Our big blower threw a bearing yesterday. So we're on our backup blower. That's what's running today. We're a little less in the position where we want to run that on old icy snow. The new blower does great. We can run it through anything. It's going to chew it up and put it into a truck. The old blower, that tends to take it down. So we're trying not to tear up too much right now with that in mind, knowing that we want to pick up mostly what we put out in a day so that we don't have to break it up a second time. Once we get the new blower back up and going and get parts here, we'll get back to getting out in front of a lot more streets and then windrowing that and getting down to the asphalt pavement, because we're going to have temperatures in the 40s next week. So we want to let Mother Nature help us out as much as possible. Lots of good volunteer contractors, again, this year, who are willing to help us out. They've got snowboards, they're ready to go. They've provided us updated insurance, updated rates. So we have more who have offered blades and help than we want to use. We're trying to walk that line between budget. Anything that we take out of the budget is maintenance equipment we're not going to buy or can't be used on other things. So it's kind of that balance between Mother Nature, what we're doing, making sure we're being efficient, effective, and then using our crew to do as much as possible. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I mean, we're through that emergency route position, still touching those up, trying to respond to, calls during the day. And then we'll get into those other priority routes and try to promote drainage once we start getting a lot of this warm up. We see a lot of things in the curb and gutter lines right now that we're concerned about. That just means when things do melt, they're going to back up or not get around those vehicles. And we're going to really have people, pay attention to that. If they can help us get drainage back down as it starts to go, that'll help with the ice and getting things off the street.
Thank you. Just by way of procedurally, council will ask questions probably of Lance and then, but generally speaking, the audience doesn't. So in the event that questions don't get answered that you would like to have answered, if you would, just feel free to email and reach out and, hopefully we can get some of these things, these answers for you tonight. Does any council have questions for Lance? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Council President Cox. Lance, great update. Really appreciate the level of detail and how much you share about the complexity of the situation, both with the storm and then the various equipment that we have and what works. The question I have comes from last winter, and if you want to sit on this for a few weeks and then come back after we do some more storms. But last year, we talked about the potential for taking action so that we don't have parked cars on streets, especially during these big events. And right now we do a volunteer call out, please consider moving your cars. Of course, on Thanksgiving, that wasn't going to happen this time around. We can continue to do that in a volunteer fashion, or I think we can consider other steps to take so that we have clearer streets for our equipment to move through. I'd be curious if your thinking has changed or evolved on that, or if that's something you want to come back to later in the winter too.
No, I'm happy to provide you an update. I'm actually sitting on the street signs, and waiting to see what the year looked like that do open up some of those very narrow right of ways and say no parking tollway zone during snow operations, or when snow is on the road. So we're looking especially down some of these narrow right of ways where you're seeing you have hardly any room for the berm and the equipment, and then shutting down one side of that road during the time when we're picking up. We want to make that available to the public at other times, but we want to be able to get through there safely, and can think of areas where it leads into school zones, and we get these big ice berms and people are going sideways. There's just not enough room to navigate them. So it's not trying to, we're hoping that we wouldn't have to take something away, which people really look at that right away. That's the city's right away, is their extra parking space and their extra place to put their equipment and to use, is the last thing that we want to do is to have to start posting these and saying, hey, we need these. But from a safety standpoint, we've got our places designated. We'll release that in the press release before we do it so that we notify the areas that we're looking at that. A lot of these are down steep hills, where we've already had people sliding sideways, and there's parked things in the way, they're not able to gain traction. We're not able to get in there and blade appropriately and trying to do that, or where you're seeing that we just don't have that 40-foot of width, we're getting down to the 30-foot or less in some of those areas. So yes, we do have a plan. We have a way to implement it, and the chief and I have talked about that. So I think that you'll see some of those changes being made as needed, and we're dealing with snow operations.
Council or President Cox.
Yeah.
Right? Thank you. Didn't mean to preempt anything there. So look forward to when you're ready to roll that out, hearing more about it.
No, that's great. Thanks for the question.
I do have a couple of questions, just some questions coming in from constituents, and that is, and maybe this is easier to clarify as far as it appears, and I wasn't here over the weekend, so I wasn't able to gauge or have a good time frame, that we get kind of behind a little bit. So, and obviously there was a lot more snow than we anticipated. So in the event that there's this, and then again, we have equipment failure. We just bought that brand new blower. That's really frustrating that continues to be a problem.
I guess with that, I'll address that comment first. I guess in my 8 years, I've learned that that's the norm. Snow plowing is really hard on equipment. You're out there when nobody else is running at very cold temperatures, and you're dragging metal and blades, deep into the roadway and trying to pop things loose and push things in a way that is hard on equipment. It's the same thing when you've got snow blowers running like they are and you're moving bearings and things are heating up. There's points of failure in those machines that actually protect the machine. It's just sometimes they've got to go back in the shop, and that's part of the deal. That's why you have backups. That's why you have other pieces of equipment. New blower, that's great to have it. But, my expectation is that it is maintenance. We're going to have times when we're working on it or we're working on the other one. The same thing with trucks, when you're out there moving them down the road, and it's just all the equipment we try to have extra, and we had tried to have plan B as well. And that's where we're diving into these rates with hourly rates for contractors. When we have them, it's like having part-time employees that we can put out there, and we know that hey, if we've got a truck down, they can run, or they can run a blade, they could do different things. So it's great to get the cooperation of the community. And I also think it's a great partnership and
Mhm.
relationship to have. It worked well last year. You know, we were talking about, I guess this is a good time for me to jump into some equipment
Yes,
placement.
please, yep.
And so we're looking at another motor grader. So our older motor grader is in the 90s. We're having troubles finding parts. So we've been looking for newer used options. New options for a motor grader are $600,000 with our municipal discount. So I mean, that's a very real number. We're getting into 2018 and 19 units that we can find used with low hours on them and, you know, 7 to 8 years warranty on them for the 280,000 range. So we think used is where we want to go. And that was going to be part of my update. Hey, we found a motor grader we'd like to buy. We actually found two, but want to space this out in kind of an increment where it's not such a hard burden on the city. You know, we'll wait a few years, get back into this, and then try to keep our equipment under warranty longer. So if we can be under warranty 7, 8 years, that gives us options, you know, when we go in to trade that out. We've also found a dump truck in Missouri for $60,000 that we sent Brandon down to look at. He thinks it's a great buy. It's an 04, but you know, you're looking at a $250,000 to $300,000 truck if you bought it new, but low miles, under 60,000 miles, low use. It's going to work great for us. And then it saves us a bunch of money. But we're always looking at that, knowing that, hey, this fleet isn't brand new. You know, we're not looking for that. We're going to have to bring it in every once in a while and maintain the fleet, you know, make sure that it's operational or touch it up and get it back on the road as soon as possible. So I guess I hope that answers your question about maintenance. You know, it is, you're out there pushing the equipment pretty hard and hoping to get a lot out of it.
Yes, and I think you also answered one of the questions was, you know, the idea that we're snow removal away from sidewalks or away from drop-off points at schools. I'm, you know, pretty involved with that aspect of things where it can be pretty difficult to, I mean, if you've ever been to drop-off, if you haven't, you should do it. You should experience it. It isn't for the weak. And so then that just adds another layer of, you know, there's snow piles or whatever, but if cars aren't being moved during the time where you guys are passing through there, then that is a significant issue. Is that accurate?
It is, you know, snow berm size as well as vehicles in the way. And, you know, when our trucks are passing through or blades are passing through, what work they can get done. They're trying to do as much as they can to be effective, because that's certainly one of our highest priorities is to make sure those school zones are safe. And we've been there for pickup and drop off and know how crazy that is. So anything we can do to help and also stay out of the way and work with the schools. We hear from the bus drivers, we hear from the school directly if there's issues, and trying to do the best we can to get that snow out of the way and make it as safe as possible. But you know, that much ice underneath and you know how slick everything is. I can't wait till some of this warms up and goes away.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just being solution focused is what you talked about, just getting on top of it and getting out early makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
with
and
ice.
we also were looking at equipping some additional trucks with blades. We thought last year that we might have been able to get into a couple YDOT trucks, you know, ones that they were going to cycle through their fleet and have our names on it, but they've had such trouble getting new equipment as well. The demand, you know, supply and demand issues. And so they're still running those trucks and not by not what they want to do. You know, we're still kind of waiting on that, but we're looking at putting more blades on some of our equipment. The issue with that is those blades only do so well until things get icy, and then they start riding on top. You know, your bigger blades, and then they can't be in the narrower spot sometimes too. So that's when you got to get the motor grader back out, and you got to start chipping ice and do a better job with your windrow. And you're onto that equipment as being the most effective. But those early parts of the storm, if we could get, you know, 4 or 5 different trucks out and make a huge difference and pile things up, that's what our goal has been, and a way that we want to approach it in the future. And we think that could open it up for being safer, quicker, but it also puts us into that new blower needs to be running, because the berm sits there and it goes through freeze thaw cycles. It's much tougher to get that loose. You got to have the right equipment to do that as well.
Okay. And That's all. That's all I have.
Perfect.
Did you have any other?
No,
reports?
it's just really that equipment update. Wanted you guys to be aware, what we're looking at for used, that's coming out of that maintenance money that we've been putting aside. That's where cop cars come from. That's where, all of our fleet is coming out of, as well as these replacement vehicles. This will be where new fire trucks come out of, or whatever may be. So we're trying to be, that item, it's great, that we roll over into it, and we've met your guys' budgetary requirements for funding the general fund and what you guys want to have in extra. But we're also trying to be pretty conservative with that, make good decisions, look at the used options, and keep ourselves in a good operational place. So there's still going to be money left in that line item at the end of the year right now, but probably a couple cop cars that we're looking at later in the year that we'll probably need to replace, and then keep our eyes on anything else that becomes a problem for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Council President.
Yes, please. Councilman
Yeah,
Patterson.
Lance, now that 04 dump truck you're looking at, that's pre-def there also, isn't it?
It is.
That-
Yeah.
That's really a boon there then.
Yeah, we've talked about the DEF and what that does, and if, we can keep those heaters going and keep it from freezing up, but it's really important for us to be running when nobody else can. So
Yeah.
we need either the DEF heaters to work or those trucks to be running at any temperature. So it's kind of nice to not have to worry about
Yeah,
that.
that's good. Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Regine?
Thank you. I have two updates for things that are coming before the council soon. We've received a appeal request of a planning commission decision. And I haven't dug into all the ordinances, but in order to follow due process, I can't get all the paperwork and the public notices done prior to the December meeting. But at your January regular meeting, the process is, if you don't like a planning commission decision, you can appeal it directly to city council. So at the January meeting, you guys will have a packet in front of you, and you'll go through an appeal process for a planning commission rezoning request. The other thing I have is also out in the future, Title IV updates, zoning ordinance. We are almost ready for the first reading or of the new ordinance. Before we do that, the Planning Commission has agreed to go out and talk to the real estate MLS, individual real estate firms, have a couple contractor meetings so that they know what's coming. And then we'll have a general town hall meeting prior to the first reading. So we're looking at all those meetings going on yet in December and in January. And the first reading will probably be on the February council session. And I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, council? And also, Regine will have to leave at 7, a little bit before. Okay, she has another obligation. City Treasurer Shari.
The name of the company that we are vetted with for that insurance is Service Line Warranty. I just realized we did not post on, we had posted on Facebook the letter that was sent to, it wasn't all citizens. They must have had a certain group of citizens. I don't have the name of that company in front of me, but it's Service Line Warranty. And they usually tell me 2 times. We send it out twice a year, and they tell me before they're going to be sent out. The other thing I wanted to point out is that equipment fund that Lance was talking about. So as of October, we had over $1.4 million. So even purchasing these 2 pieces of equipment, we will still have over $1 million in that replacement fund. So that's not a current budget line item. That's already money that we have saved. And we still had $3.5 million in unrestricted funds. So we're still within where you wanted to be by still putting our extra in that equipment line item. And that is all I have.
That's good news, actually. Thank you for that update. Adam Phillips.
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Rochelle.
Hello, council. I tried to remember this at the last meeting and I forgot. I caught some of you. when I was looking ahead at the calendar, the December work session is December 26th. So I'm just looking for direction if council wants to have a work session on December 26th, or if you want to move it or skip it and pick it up in January. Just let me know.
Do we have any thoughts about that as council? I will not be here, so
Councilman Cox. Yeah.
out of town.
I would, say we move it.
Maybe we ought to board.
Will you repeat that?
Let's,
Vote?
no,
Oh,
I say we ought to board the meeting.
Oh, abort the meeting. Okay. I did not hear what you, I was like, okay, sounds like, any objection to that? Councilman Hahn? Okay. All right,
Just to be clear, we're skipping a work session in December.
that is correct.
Oh,
Thank you.
Council President Cox, can I ask?
Yes, please.
Clerk Fontaine, I mean, what would that do for the business that you have pending in front of us? Is that gonna really push us back into January on things that we, are there things that would be on that agenda that we should be addressing?
For the work session items, those are generally council discussion. I don't know how far behind that would put anything that has any sort of time frame, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we will now get into our new business. These are items of discussion, and we have several presentations this evening. So we'll start with the presentation in front of us in reference to Stacker and Airtable. So Jake, Laura, if you would, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President and Council. Most of you know
Speak
me.
into the Microphone, please.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Council President and Council. I know most of you, but just to reintroduce myself, my name is Jake. I'm founder and industrial organizational psychologist at Reworks. And over the last few years, we've designed a number of applications that have completely streamlined and automated the city. I'm going to jump into a few of those today, including building and planning and code enforcement, and certainly address what I can with your concerns with getting this rolled out quickly and public concern with that.
Good.
Okay, so just to reintroduce myself, again, my name is Jake. I'm 5th generation graduate from Lander Valley High School. I earned my master's in industrial organizational psychology. And in my past life, I actually was senior change management consultant for a tech startup in Denver. During that time, I led nationally recognized companies through change, and we sold a software that was great for our clients, right? But one of the things that I noticed that we lacked was this cohesion between project management, the technical side, and change management, the people side. And so I introduced this new package at that company to make those efforts more cohesive. And what we found was that some of our nationally recognized clients were able to navigate that change much more successfully, much more easily. And I wanted to bring this up because over the course of the last few years, change management has played a critical role in the success of this project. We spend time with every single city employee, getting to know them, understanding their pain points, understanding what's working, what's not working in a process, and really working to address that when we design these applications. That has led to much greater project success when you really understand the people side of that change. So before I dive into some of those systems, I wanted to discuss some of the process that I go through in designing each and every application. The first thing that we engage with is current to future state analysis. So that's really about understanding the current state of that client's operations, whether that's your street department, whether that's the sewer lagoons, getting to know all of those employees and digging into what's working, what's not working, what are your pain points? What are some things that we could do to streamline this? What are some processes that are working that we don't necessarily need to change? We then start to build a future state that makes sense. And that is me looking at every single stage of their process and digging into how can we streamline this task and make it so you don't have to spend time on it. make it so it doesn't cost employee hours or taxpayer dollars. And so I'm going to show you a few numbers today that I think are pretty impressive on the number of automations and processes we've been working on. After we really dig into that change management, that current to future state, I start to configure that application. I work on all of the integrations that go into the application, the automations that take place. Again, I'll show you some of those numbers in a moment. I use artificial intelligence to upload the data, clean the data, and really streamline that process from when I first started my company. Once we have our initial system in place, we jump into beta testing, and you'll see a key phrase there that I like with change champions. Change champions are your people that are going to be working with the system every day. I want to spend a lot of time with them. I want to understand everything about their role so that I can design the system in a way that makes more sense. Once we get their feedback, once we understand everything we need to know, we can make changes to the system. We can make it even better. And we've seen that with building and planning, a lot of revisions that have come into play. We have a structure in place and we start to create supporting materials. I'm going to jump into those in just a moment. But I think what's most important are 6 and 7. Okay. My job, not only with designing these applications, but with change management, is designing a rollout that makes sense. That's going to look different for every city department. That's going to look different for a number of different employees who need maybe a little more time to grasp the material, or maybe they're perfectly fine on their phone and they're good to go, and all you have to do is give them a link. So we really start to build a rollout plan for each department, really. And then short and long-term support. This is support that takes place over the course of a year, from really hands-on in the beginning, making sure bugs are worked out, to, all right, it's been almost a year now. What are your thoughts? Is there anything we can change? Maybe there isn't. So that's the process that goes into play when I think about one application. And what I'd like to show you guys today is that as of today, we've designed 23 custom applications. Okay. These are systems that are in Airtable, so accessible to our administrators, and systems that are in Stacker, which is accessible to our employees and to you guys as a council. 23 custom applications. And I think what's more impressive is that we have 308 automations that are now in place that streamline different areas of the city. That could be something like when a record is complete, uploaded into our file storage. That could be, all right, this record has changed status. Now let's notify the applicant of that building permit. So there's a number of different things when you think about employee time, taxpayer dollars that take a lot of time. Maybe that's just walking to a filing cabinet, getting your scans put in, everything like that. We've eliminated those steps. And last but not least, at Reworks, we have helped the city with 559 processes. These are processes big and small, again, from how to create a record to how to save it into storage. 559 processes across those 23 systems. So to dig a little bit into some of that supporting material I talked about in our process, these are big, beautiful, complex applications. And with that, you want to make sure your employees are in the know. They know exactly what to do. They know exactly how to interact with a process or a system. So part of our offering is to design detailed help articles and fully customized learning paths for each position. We want the employee to be able to plug and play day one, know exactly the list of items they need to watch or reference to do their job effectively. We also design extensive documentation on all those automations. So those 308 automations I've talked about. And I think what's most important here are backup plans. So you're going to have systems that might go down for maintenance. You're going to have systems that, maybe they go down for a few hours. You need to have a plan in place so your employees can keep working. Part of the stuff that we've designed here is the ability to push a button and a backup plan get initiated in an instant. Maybe that is the links to all the forms they need to do to continue their job. all of that can be initiated with the push of a button. So here's just an example of those help articles, step-by-step guides that employees can reference as of today. And I wanted to call out this slide here, the learning paths that have been designed for each position, right? There's quite a few different positions at the city. And so I use instructional design and change management to really help me to design learning paths that can really be a number of different ways to approach that particular position. Maybe they like more hands-on. Maybe they just want to watch a video. There's a number of different learning paths we've incorporated for all the different positions. Okay, so just to give you a little progress snapshot of some of the things we've been working on. You guys are most familiar with purchase orders, right? We've been able to really dig into what's spent on each vendor. Okay, what's our GL account spending to date? Fleet vehicles, we can automatically create work orders based on a schedule. We can have those work orders go into a bucket and we can know the cost per mileage, cost per machine hour of a fleet. Book Me room reservations, definitely a simple app, but allows the employees to schedule room reservations at the city. Public Works allows our Public Works teams to complete work orders and to complete locates submitted to 811. The Lift Committee is an application used by our Lift Committee team, and they use that to process those applications and to create evaluation records. You guys also as a council have access to view those progress reports. Last but not least, learning and support. This is an application that basically puts all those help articles, all that documentation in one place so that anyone can access it. Okay, now switching gears to what I've been working on recently, and that is creating all those different forms on the city's website that are PDFs into an online format. Just to give you guys an idea of what that looks like for each and every form, we create the form, we create the status notifications that go out to the different parties. We create the application side of things in Stacker so that all of our different employees can look at the information that makes sense to them. And of course, those automations like that file storage. So that's what goes into every single application that I've been working on. And as of today, that's about 37 applications. Citizens of Lander will be able to log in real quick into the website, pull up that online form and fill it out. They're going to get notifications throughout the life cycle of their application automatically. So they're always in the know. And, you know, one thing that I think that's most important here is that this rollout is going to be very slow. It's going to be something that our employees play with for some time before it's rolled out slowly to the public. One thing I like to show here is that these 37 different forms span across 5 different departments, right? So that's where that change management comes in to understand each department and what system is going to make sense. And I think one of the coolest figures that I like to show here is that on all of those forms, we need to design a user experience that makes sense for the different parties. Take, for example, our livestock permit, right? That's going to go to the veterinarian for approval. What does that experience look like? Is that seamless? Can they quickly sign off on it? So there's 21 different user experiences that we've designed at Reworks for all those applications. Okay, so I'm going to jump into a quick demo and hopefully not take too much of your time, but I do want to show you some of the areas we've worked on. If we look here, this is an example of that building permit application. Users can open this form from a QR code from the city's website, from one of the number of infographics we'll have out front with the process and everything that they need to know. And they'll be able to apply for multiple permits for the same address at once. So if they're doing a full service, building project, they can apply for all those different permits at the same time and get it done very quickly. Once that application is submitted, we're looking at Airtable here. This is going to show us our Airtable users a quick little snapshot of where those applications are at. So they'll be able to see where those applications are at, click into those very, very fast, make comments if they need to, right? But coordinate with our building inspector to move that process along. From the building inspector's perspective, they have a dashboard that they can log into each morning and quickly understand what are some concerns that have been reported by the public. You know, what are some new ones that I see in my dashboard? What are my latest applications? Keep in mind, I'm looking at test data here. What is a map of all of the locates around town? Okay, does everyone have a permit? Are we missing out on anyone that needs to be, you know, permitted? So this is just an example of a dashboard that our inspector can look at each morning. Again, if they want to look at it as a pipeline view, we have that. And what I like about this is that we can quickly and easily move these permits with a push of a button, and that is going to send that notification out to the applicant. If we look at an application in more detail, here's an example of a gas service inspection. You'll notice that we've integrated with the Fremont County Map Server to quickly pull up that information and interact with that just like we would on the full website. We have different tabs up here at the top to show us the different areas of that application from the application details submitted, right? And we've also set up a lot of logic here that goes into helping us understand where that application's at. Has payment been submitted? Are there any related applications for this address we need to know about? Are there any pending inspections we're still working on? If an application has been submitted for that address within the last 365 days, it's going to automatically link to this one. So that whether you're in the planning department, the building department, up front at the front desk, you'll know exactly the different applications going on at this address. You can quickly pull up contacts for this application from everything from the applicant name to the contractor details to the owner of record based in our city address database or even renter of record. For a detailed look at the property, we see here, we have a lot of different information that we have pulled together from the city's resources, from the Fremont County Map Server, so that our building inspector can quickly see that. Looking at inspections and processing those inspections, the building inspector will be able to create inspections within a minute and have a set of inspection points that are followed for every single inspection of that type. This is a list that we're still working on, still tweaking to make sure it's quick and seamless, but they will be able to quickly come in here and approve or reject whatever items there might be on that inspection. Once that inspection is complete, an inspection PDF is generated, and that's going to automatically get saved into Google Drive and get sent to that applicant. I want to switch gears now to airport and fire. So airport and fire is a system that's been designed to do fire inspections and to keep track of airport hangars. This is a system that, again, we can do, business inspections, hangar inspections, childcare inspections, and different fire inspections of the like. And so when we come into an example fire inspection here, notice I'm using 240 Lincoln City Hall for all my examples. Again, we have our Fremont County Map Server. And I think what's cool here is that maybe we want to see the aerial view, right? Or maybe we need to do measurements. We have all the tools that are available in the Fremont County Map Server in order to do that. Scrolling down, we see again our fire inspection points. This one happens to be for a business, and we can approve or reject those. Once that fire inspection is complete, a PDF is generated. It's saved in Google Drive in that address folder, and it's there forever. Switching gears one more time to code enforcement. Code enforcement has a system where they can keep track of dog violations, weeds, parking, different things like that. They can quickly and easily create those code enforcement violations. Again, see a map of that record. update that violation as it changes status. But one thing that's great about the system is that it's going to automatically update that status as much as possible. It's going to let our code enforcement guy know, hey, I have to follow up with this list today. When that code enforcement violation is complete, again, we can do a digest that's saved into that record. And we can also generate different letters, right? If we want to communicate with the person in that way. All this comes down to our address record that we have in Airtable and in Stacker. Okay, we have 240 Lincoln Street here. Here is the address record that I'm looking at. All those different files across all the different applications, all the different easements that get uploaded by Public Works, different things like that are going to be saved into the Google Drive, accessible at any time, so that we can do faster records requests and anything else we might need. And so that's all I really had for this evening. Are there any questions?
Councilman, yeah, Larson.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, just going into code enforcement, for example, has our code enforcement officer been using this this system?
Yes. He's created a number of violations. Going on a second right along this week.
Okay, and what's his feelings on this?
He really likes this stuff.
He was actually keeping track of those code enforcement violations with, a kind of business card, just flipping through those. And so this gives him a very comprehensive list of exactly what to follow up on a specific day.
Okay, because I know it's really easy for somebody that's created this, to walk through here and you can push the right buttons and all the magic appears and it really looks great. But if the person that's using it is lost from the first button push on, then there's some issues there. But you're saying that, and I'd be willing to listen to any of the other. Is it a good system all the way through?
Yeah, from the code enforcement side, it's actually been great. Because it alerts them instead of doing everything by hand. It's simple. Jake makes it very simple to understand. I love when I don't understand something, he sends me the videos of how to do it. Makes me feel really big. But no, it's actually very simple. And from our side, from the code enforcement side, it's extremely good. We got Sean a little tablet so it alerts them. So all the stuff that we kind of missed, because when we started code enforcement back up, it was an avalanche of years of not taking care of stuff. So the hardest thing is Sean, just say abandoned vehicles or trailers. He would tag 30 in a day, and then it was, if something happened and he's running next thing, and then how is he going to remember those 60 that he tagged or 30 that he tagged? This thing alerts him and it actually tells him, hey, you know what, you need to follow up the 3-day parking for the trailer is up on this block. So, he enjoys it.
Great. Okay.
And Regine had a comment as well.
I do, thank you. Everything from travel reimbursements, those kind of things are so simple for staff now. Getting a vehicle in to get fixed, putting in a request and getting the oil changed or a tire fixed is also very easy. I'm really looking forward to planning coming online, which Jake promises me that's right after building permits. Because the planning process is fraught with public notice and notifications back to clients and notifications to people within 400 feet. And this will automate all that for me and it will be fabulous.
That's great. Any other questions of Jake?
Councilman Cox. Please go to.
Go ahead. Yeah, Lance.
Sure. I guess as a supervisor, when we got into this, all these softwares that are out there that you can buy for Public Works always come with monthly fees or yearly fees, and they get more expensive as you add to them. Being able to customize this and then have it be ours, all this data is just a giant spreadsheet. When it really comes down to it, we're really keeping that data in rows and columns, and we're keeping it within the city of Lander. So yes, the apps are a front end for accessing what Airtable is when he talks about it, but the reality is that all gets saved into where we can get that data again. I mean, we were doing things by paper. You couldn't find them again. You couldn't look them back up, budgeting on what we would spend and pulling up purchase orders. The checks and balances that are in place as far as our spending, our fuel usage, those things are getting to the point where it's going to be very difficult to sneak one by anyone at this point in time as you're looking at what you're buying. I mean, I'm looking at everybody's expenditures down to $2, or less, it's every expenditure they're making. And it brings up, hey, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? It also brings up as a summary, and I have Jake doing this for me, is okay, everybody who's using this app, they have, a way that they should be using it. And if they're not, that's my alert. It's like, hey, we're 2 months behind on these processes that are due. And from supervising multiple departments in multiple places, that's a quick and easy discussion. Like, hey, this isn't being inputted. Is there something wrong, or are we falling behind on where we need to be? So it keeps us on track is the other part. These things are required, or they notify. If fleet vehicles aren't being done, it shows how many are sitting there in the queue and that they haven't moved. Like it's, just the checks and balances that it provides has made it much easier to be able to make sure people are doing their jobs and they're accountable for their jobs. So lots of built-in notifications, but also processes that we can customize and say, hey, we need this so that we can be more efficient. We're going to try to run a building department with, one guy and as a building inspector, and then a supervisor as part of that department that does 100 other things. And when you look at other departments, Riverton, I think they have 3 people in that department. We're going to do it with 1, and we're going to do it because we're going to streamline the process and make it easier for us long-term so that we're not having to do the accounting and the secretarial work, and that the processes will take care of themselves. So this is how we've kind of figured out how to stay within budget, get these things built, we'll own them, and then be able to use them or customize them.
Councilwoman Stubble?
Thank you, Council President Cox. I just wanted to say, Jake, it's just impressive. It's just incredible in terms of efficiency. You said something earlier about a quick comment about staff hours, our taxpayer dollars. And we take that to heart. We know that carefully. We know that very well here. And I think you've shown incredible efficiency in terms of allowing us to be better stewards of those taxpayer dollars by creating these systems and then being accessible and deeply accessible to doing the educational and the training and providing the videos or whatever is needed so that it's not just a platform that's not being used, it's being deeply integrated. And hearing the staff testimony to that point is just really heartening. So thanks for what you're creating here, and thanks for how are you helping the city save those dollars and create better systems for our staff too.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Oh, pardon me. Yes, Councilwoman White.
Thank you. I'll echo what Councilwoman Stubble said. That's fantastic. And so, Shari, I kind of related this a question for you. Does this mean that Cassell is on its way out? And I'm assuming that's a good thing, given that Cassell was a fairly pricey thing for us to have, and customizations were even pricier for it.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I got a hold of Riverton because I knew that they had priced out Cassell. In 2019, the Cassell package was selling for $258,000 and $59,500 for the annual support. Now since we've changed and gotten rid of several of them, we're downsized in Cassell, so we're not using all the modules. We still, and that saved us. So our annual fee is $28,000 a year. I don't know if we'll be able to completely get rid of it, but we'd sure like to get like our timekeeping in there, because everything can import into Cassell. We're paying for so many user licenses for everybody to be able to input their time, and nobody likes it, that would be a huge savings if we could get the time tracking in through Stacker, that they could do their time and then just import the hours and run the payroll through Cassell would be another savings. But just when we eliminated the service orders out of Cassell from that was a $6,000 savings just for a 1 year. I mean, every year, that's how much that service orders was costing us doing it out of Cassell. So in the end, when we finally get everything streamlined, it will be quite a cost savings. The other thing that it really saved on is for the audit. I just give the auditor complete access to the Airtable. They pull up their own checks, their invoices, where before I had to pull pull all the hard copies, make, show them the invoices. It was so time consuming. And they actually even like it better. If we could get everything into Airtable as a searchable database, it would make the audit so much easier for the auditor that they could audit anywhere and be able to log in and pull up that information.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Okay, Kevin Kershishnik, you would come on up, please. And also just some housekeeping, just make sure you tell us who you are and what you're doing here. And even though most of us know who you are.
Oh, wait. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. My name is Kevin Kershishnik. I am the secretary for WEDA, which is the Wyoming Economic Development Association. Also, the executive director for Idea Inc. that does economic development in Riverton and across the county. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about the economic development building blocks, which I love dearly. I don't know if that's because I'm an engineer and I like to compartmentalize things with everything in economic development. We can put them into little buckets or little blocks. Or maybe it's just because I like playing with blocks as a kid. Not really sure. But go to the next slide here. Okay, and economic development, what is that? That's the question. I asked that. So my history is I came from the private sector, about 25 years, running manufacturing companies, different departments, et cetera. And then I went into the public sector about 5 years ago. And at that time I asked the question, what exactly is economic development? How do we actually help businesses expand and grow? How can we form the public-private partnership to make that occur? And so like to get into it a little bit. And the definition of economic development, you can pull up the dictionary online, Google, wherever, and you'll get slightly different definitions. The International Economic Development Council, which obviously is international, they've come up with this definition, which is the cultivation of activities that create a net gain of money into the community. Pretty broad, right? That can be a lot of activities that would fall into that category. For the Fremont County sales tax for economic development, we said, all right, let's get a little more specific on that. And if you look at the ballot verbiage, it says two things. Basically retains or increases employment, jobs, or results in a net gain of money into the community. So those are the two criteria that we have on that front. Here are the economic development building blocks. And this is what was first formed by the Wyoming Business Council probably 15 years ago. And they did it to try to compartmentalize, again, the different aspects of economic development. On the bottom is the large block, which is the most important. You have to have supportive elected officials like yourselves to move projects forward. It can either move a project forward or it can stymie it. For example, a lot of projects we've worked on, one was the Honor Farm land, and we went down to the SLIB, State Land Investment Board, top 5 elected officials. Right? That was who gave the final approval for some funds to make that project happen. 2 times we went down there and they said, well, we're not going to make a decision. We're not sure. We want this information, that information, et cetera. That project ended up taking 33 months, about $250,000 in in-kind plus direct expenses, something a private company would never do, right? They're not going to do that without a guaranteed return. So there has to be certain aspects of economic development that happen. The way that finally happened was the governor stood up and said, okay, I call for a vote. We need to vote on this to see whether this project's going forward or not. So sometimes have to make that difficult decision. And with the flyer, hopefully you guys have those. Okay, those are the ones that WEDA gives to the elected officials to kind of say, okay, how can we collaborate? How can we work together to make economic development a success in our communities, in our state? And in there, probably on one of the folds, you'll see the role of the elected officials. and I'll just read through those. Develop a vision and plan, which you guys have probably through your strategic plan. Make sure the infrastructure is adequate and has room to grow. Have zoning and permitting ordinances in place, and we heard about that earlier today, that those are in place. Business-friendly environment, getting a lot of efficiencies from the last presenter. That's great to see. Make sure that you establish an attractive community for first-rate quality of life. And appoint persons or organizations to be responsible for responding to business leads. And that's Lita and the organization that you have here in Lander. So that's great. Yeah. So then what ended up happening was the building blocks, we had them structured with, it basically is a pyramid. And then we said, well, it's a little bit different than that because it really looks like the culmination is business recruitment. I'll go back to that one. Right. So this would lead you to believe the only time you're successful is if you're recruiting a business. Reality is a lot of economic development occurs in these lower blocks. That's where we need to spend our time to make that business recruitment portion happen. And really for economic development, 80% of the job creation and efforts are right here in these two blocks for business retention, expansion, and entrepreneurship. So they changed this at WIDA and Business Council to say, all right, one feeds the other. You need to have your businesses on the top as they continue to grow, get more and more employees. There's more people in the community to help out, to work on the quality of life, to work on the infrastructure. And then as that happens, then you have more employees and it just continues to feed itself. It grows and grows. So we felt this was a better depiction of economic development versus the pyramid because there's a lot more to it than just business recruitment. Back to the leadership side. Again, these are things that you can do as elected officials, making a difference. Citizens can bring things to a certain position, and then they need the help of the elected officials to move projects forward or not, depending on whether you think they're worthy projects. But that's a very important part, and that's why the largest block in there is leadership and elected officials. Okay, moving on to the quality of life. So that's basically everything in the community. Why would somebody want to live in your community? Why does someone want to come to Fremont County? Why does someone want to come to Lander? A lot of great things that we have to offer here in this state. That's why a lot of us are here. It's the outdoor activities. It's the remoteness. It's the great things that we can do in our community, the way we can raise our children, our families. All those things are quality of life. We put together a couple of them here that you can see and you recognize across your community. Well, that's going up to Sinks Canyon. You see a lot of tourists and visitors coming in there. Artworks across town. You have a lot of great restaurants, expanding, et cetera. What do people like to do? They like to have our arts and culture. Love to eat. Love to get into the parks, et cetera, et cetera. I'll kind of rush through these a little bit, and then we can see if there's additional questions. But the next one is the workforce development, right? How do you get a workforce? How do you continue to train those individuals to make sure that they're available for your company so they can expand? That's what you have to do. And we have quite a few resources here. One of them actually is through the Workforce Development Council, and the chairman happens to be here today, Mr. Libera. And there are things that they put forth through training grants. And if you have a business and you're not taking advantage of that, highly encourage that they do, because there's a training grant for existing employees, new hires, pre-hire, and apprenticeships. So it's great programs. What resources do you have? In Fremont County, we have great educational institutions. Obviously, we have the University of Wyoming that comes up here and educates people. Also Central Wyoming College, Wind River Job Corps, Wyoming Catholic College. There's a plethora of them. You also have the 9 school districts in the county, career technical. You can get down to makerspace level. There's a lot of opportunities to educate employees. And the one thing that we're seeing at the federal level is the DOL, Department of Labor, has a lot of funds that are coming through to the state to help educate people. And so if anybody needs education for their employees, please reach out to myself or one of my colleagues. There's a lot of great resources available.
Yeah. Councilman.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Larson too, if you're just.
Okay, so when you talk about training employees, are you talking like safety training? Or are you talking business training? What is it you're looking at exactly, Kevin?
Or, Madam Chair, okay, Councilman. So basically, there are, through those grants that I mentioned, it can be any business that's looking to train their employees. It could be a retail, it could be a manufacturer, it could be energy sector. Any of those would be available through those grants that are available, training grants.
But training in any specific area that they need trained.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah, that's available and, yeah, I mean, because the internship grant, if you're in a business and you're looking to do that, you could hire somebody, bring them in, try them out, see if they fit culturally in your business, and also make sure that the employee fits into the business as well. So bi-directional, the business and the employee both can check each other out, make sure it's a good fit. And that can be up to 6 months and $25 an hour if it's in one of the targeted industries. So what the state tries to do is they say, all right, if they're, high tech, engineering, technical, et cetera, they would have a little higher dollar amount in their preferred industries that they would have, but all industries would apply. Yes.
So if you had a group that needed to go in and do some trenching and shoring training, is that something that that you would be able to get some funds for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be approved through the workforce training grant or fund. It's a workforce development training fund. And once they would approve it, then you'd be good to go. So you'd have to fill out the application online. They have certain criteria, but it's pretty open as to what's available.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Infrastructure development. So that's a big one, right? How do you define infrastructure? And gonna show you some of these here. What we think that is from a WIDA perspective is it includes water, sewer, power, natural gas, broadband. All the utilities have to be there for a business, right? It has to be there for them to exist and to grow. There's other things that come about from there. You also need to have, well, for example, air service. You can see that there. You need to be able to have the business be able to communicate with the outside world. So that's broadband from a digital connectivity standpoint, and then physically being able to transport employees and customers to and from the business is important. So Central Wyoming Regional Airport, as you can see there, is very critical for businesses. Like we say, a mile of highway gets you a mile down the road, a mile of runway gets you anywhere in the world. You can have international customers, clients come into Riverton, into Lander, into Fremont County, help our businesses grow. Also on well, I guess a couple of examples there. So if I go back, Brunton, I think we mentioned this before, Brunton, about 7, 8 years ago, they moved all their general administrative employees to Colorado because we didn't have reliable air service, right? Now that that's back, you're starting to see people come back in, different businesses grow, been able to recruit some businesses. Herman Global moved here because they had reliable air service as well. So those things are important for a lot of our businesses in the area. And then also the ground transportation. We have a very large county, as we all know, landmass wise, it would be 47th largest state in the union, if we counted it that way. And we're not very populated. 40,000 residents roughly. So we need to be able to get some of our citizens transported to school, to work, to medical appointments, et cetera. So those things are critical. The business parks you can see listed here, have several in Lander and there's a couple in Riverton as well. But they have to be ready for businesses to grow. So this is where we spend most of our time, as I mentioned at the onset. The economic development organizations will spend 60 to 80% of their time or more on the business recruitment and expansion side. People looking for the big splash of the new recruitment, but a lot of it, all the business generation, most of it comes from this area. A bunch of things that are advantages to that. One is you already have people in the area that like the area, that want to stay in the area, have ties to the community. You're not bringing somebody from the outside that says, whoa, what was it? 8 below coming over from Hudson? Yeah, that's pretty darn cold. I think I'm going back to California or somewhere. So those type of things happen. And then you also have them already in the community. We have housing issues as well. You don't have to create a lot of new homes. They're already in homes in the community. So different things like that are advantages to helping businesses basically be retained and expand. So let me show you a couple here. A couple in the local community that have happened. And what you see is there's economic drivers in each community. And in the Lander community, you guys know that far better than myself, but it's going to be federal, state, county government, outdoor recreation through Knowles, Maven, companies like that, hospitalities, restaurants, et cetera. I have a bunch of manufacturers listed here because that's my area of expertise. But anyway, you can see that. That's how you grow your own business and continue to do that through the business retention expansion side. And the Business Council has identified that as a key area, and they're putting a lot of resources towards that as well to assist local communities who don't have the bandwidth like the state does to address those. And probably the biggest one right there up on the upper left, right? And the lower left, both of those are great projects. But Maven, through the Business Ready Community Grant Program, you're going to have funds coming back in. And just to look forward a little bit, in Riverton, we did a very similar thing. We started out with a Business Ready Community Grant for Brunton. Then we did one for BTI over in Shoshone. Then we did one for the daycare and for legacy molding. And what happens is those monies come in and you take those rents and then you have to use those for economic development purposes. So again, you get multipliers on this money. It comes in from the state. That's their goal, is to distribute it to the communities. We receive that, we invest, we help local businesses, monies come back, we help additional businesses, and it just continues to grow. Again, feeding on that cycle that I showed you earlier. Innovation and entrepreneurship. That is, yeah, it's interesting. When we first started the entrepreneurial side, this is through Impact 307, which is part of the Wyoming Business Resource Network, and also the Bootstrap Collaborative. They asked me, how many entrepreneurs do you think we have in Fremont County? What could we sustain year over year? And at the time I was thinking, 10, maybe 12. Luckily I was wrong. So the first year there was 38 entrepreneurs that applied for the program. Year 2, there's 42. And that continues to grow, which is creating a great ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystem in our community. And they've been able to raise some monies for these businesses to help them out. And that's come through the Startup Challenge. And here's a couple of them. Wind River Vans expanding here in Lander. Penguin Projects, both of those were winners of this last Startup Challenge. They've done a great job, and then some other ones across the county. You can see pictures on the left of the recipients from 2022 and 2023 respectively. So the things that we're excited about is it's creating this entrepreneurial ecosystem where people are helping each other. It's like, okay, I've tried that before. These are the problems I ran into. You may or may not have that, but I'm just telling you ahead of time to hopefully make them more efficient, be able to have their businesses be successful and continue to grow in our community, because that's what it's all about, right? Creating jobs for our kids and our grandkids, et cetera, et cetera. So running that forward. And some of the ones there were, even Lander Motel, Maven, and others here in Lander are really part of that as well. But it requires the complement of many organizations, elected officials, and the Wyoming economic development organizations to make this successful. Then the last building block, not the most important, but the last one, is the relocation of new businesses. And this one, you have to have all those other pieces in place, because they'll come to you and they'll say, okay, do you have a commercial airport? Do you have an interstate? How is your schools ranked? How are your medical facilities? These are the type of questions that we receive from companies coming in, and we need to be able to answer those. And we're getting better and better as we go forward. And we've been able to recruit several companies going forward across the county and continue to do that. This will be through, in Lander, predominantly I'll be through LEDA. LEDA's here as your economic development organization to assist and to answer those business requests and provide tours in the new business park and across town. So LEDA's done some great things, and we'll continue to do that. And I'm encouraged by what I've seen so far across the county and here in Lander. So optimistic for sure. here are some of the business resources that are available. So I started putting them together, and you can see there's quite a few, and there's more than that. I couldn't get them all on the same page. So I just wanted to show you some of these. The one that we use quite a bit is the Wyoming Business Resource Network. And that's through the state. Monies, our taxpayer dollars go in, they go through the state to the legislature to allocate it to the business council. It then subcontracts with the University of Wyoming. And then majority of these resources here are underneath that umbrella. A lot of these are funded partially by the federal government and the state government in combination as matching funds, but they're available to all Wyoming businesses. So if you're a Wyoming business registered with the Secretary of State, you have access to these tools. And the SBDC, have a former SBDC member in the audience as well. And Manufacturing Works, they're available to help out. So this is the economic development side. And I guess that kind of concludes the presentation. I can answer any questions. You can contact me afterwards. Do have business cards. I can give them to you. I think most of you have them, but would be willing to entertain any questions that you may have.
Council, any questions? I don't think so. Thank you for the presentation. It was,
Council President.
it was good.
Information. Yeah, thank you for what you do.
You do have a question?
Community.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Councilwoman Stubble.
I want to
Words?
pause to give space to other council members. So I'm catching you just the wrong minute. Thank you, Mr. Krishiznik. It's always helpful to have this reminder. I'm struck when I look at the role of the elected official that what is not on there is a role we have taken on, and that is in the distribution of grant funds to small businesses and accepting recommendations from our economic development organization, but making the ultimate decision either in accepting those recommendations or not. I wonder if you could comment on that additional role and the just help me shape my thinking. You know, we know that some of the grant funding has had some major successes. There have been some businesses that are going to bring back tax dollars to Lander, they're putting that into good use. And we know that there's controversy around those grant dollars as well. So when I look at this list and I think, well, we're doing something that's not on this list, help inform my thinking on that.
Sure. Yeah, Councilwoman, Madam Chair. Okay. So a lot of the brochure that you have came out a little bit before the economic tax for economic or sales tax for economic development came out to Fremont County. But that was a tool in the state coffers. And one thing that we hear when we go to the state and ask for additional funds over and over is, well, have you taken care of yourself, right? We put things into the state statutes that is a general tax, sales tax, right? Which Fremont County is taking advantage of with the roads. The special purpose tax, which we're not using at this point, and then the 7 cent, if you will, is for economic development. And we're one of 2 counties that have actually passed that in our county to move forward. So I think, personal opinion, is that it's very important for us to be able to help these businesses, help all these building blocks. Again, if we can continue to grow those, it raises the water level for all. A very important task. And as elected officials, the only ones that can approve those funds, you know, state statute doesn't allow individuals to do that. It has to be the elected bodies that makes the approval. So the municipalities and the counties have to do that. And it's a very important function in my mind, is to look at that and how do I best help these companies move forward? How do I help grow my city and my county? Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, Councilman Larson.
Okay, so I guess I'm looking at everything here that's involved in economic development. And if we put this or when the half-cent sales tax comes up for renewal, and we continue to hand out these public grants the way that we are, we're going to get shot down. I mean, people just see this as an entitlement type situation, you know, when according to your expertise and so forth, this is all good economic development, but the community sees it as you know, that we're just handing out money to special people, and they're they're not very happy with it. How do we change that?
Well, it's going to take a group effort, right, to change that. The community is going to have to see that as an advantage. You know, I'll offer a couple of things at this point. One is, for example, in Riverton, we recruited Kafaru that came up from Colorado, brought 23 jobs. We ended up paying incentives of about 85,000. I talked to Josh Saltzgaber, who is the owner of Electrical Supplies. And so they do lights, fixtures, those type of things. He said with the construction project that they did, he received in direct revenue increases $100,000 from that project. One vendor.
Yeah.
You know, so that's, again, you got to look at the velocity on the money. Okay, what are you going to put in initially? And then what's going to be the multiplier on that money? How does that go? And I know it's pretty similar here with Lander Hotel and so forth, is that you start to get other contractors and things we need to look at are what are the best practices, right? There's some things I think that we're learning over the first 3 years is what are the best practices? You know, should you have clawbacks on equipment? Should it be a loan and a grant? Without getting into too much details, if you do that, it's better than just gifting because you want the recipient to have skin in the game. You want to be able to move that forward. But if you do a loan, now you start to have management issues. You know, what are you doing on bad debt collection? What are you doing, you know, with the assets, et cetera? So a lot of things coming into play there. We've been talking about that amongst some folks in the county, and the county commissioners actually have put together a task force to look at best practices from Lander, Riverton, the county. How are all these monies being handled? How are they being issued? What are best practices? How can we tighten that up and make that more efficient, getting a better multiplier on those monies? We also, as a sidebar, IDEA had given, well, we pledged some monies as a grant to help a grant writer or establish a grant writer to get additional multipliers on these monies. The Wyoming Business Council / Harvard group, it came out here and they said, one thing that we're really missing in Wyoming is the number of grants. We're not getting our fair share of the grants. For example, we have about 25 different entities receiving them and maybe 25 grants, you know, per annum, something like that at the federal level. Alaska, that then said, we're not doing very good. What can we do? They put together a task force at the state level. They're receiving over 300 grants per annum in over 300 entities. You know, significant uptake on the amount of multiplier on that money. So that's one of the things that we want to help facilitate. And that's why we've made that offer to FCAG to see if the Fremont County Association of Governments, see if they could put together a plan with the grant writer to get additional multipliers on that money, right? That's really the goal is maximize the benefit of everything we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councilman Hahn?
Yeah, so how do you keep the people from gaining the tax dollars through the 0.5% sales tax and building a business and then turning around and selling it to make a ton of money off of, you know, our money that we paid in taxes for them to create this?
Yeah, great question. I'll run the parallel situation is with the Wyoming Business Council. Okay, if you go back in early 2000s, they came out with the Business Ready Community Grant Program, and it was predominantly a grant program. It was about 95% grant, 5% match from the local entity that had to be a government organization, municipalities, county, or a nonprofit economic development organization. Okay, so they did that and they ran into that problem where they do a business park, for example, couldn't get it occupied. Then they would end up, the city would say, okay, well, what are we doing with this asset, right? We need to get something out of that. They would sell it at less than fair market value or as close to fair market value as they could. Then somebody would turn around, build it up, right, and make money off of that. So what the Business Council had done is they said, how do we change that? So they said, we need to have a little bit more of a, they do have somewhat of a clawback, but they made the clawback a little more significant. And they also then increased the amount of loan. So they want it to be ideally a 50-50 loan grant versus a 95% grant. You know, then it gets it closer to traditional lending levels or a little more equity that's having to be put in by the entity that receives those funds. That's just an example of what another entity has done. And that's what we're talking about is how do we put this together? How could we do that? If we do, let's say the grants are only going to be for capital equipment and you have a UCC code, you have a UCC right there with that says, okay, I'm going to hold title to this and then you'll keep it for a period of time. What happens, the entity can't sell it, right? Because you have the clawback on it. But what happens if that capital equipment gets degraded, gets trashed, gets destroyed, whatever? Now you have an asset that isn't worth anything, right? So it might have been 100,000, now it's worth 10. So there's a lot of nuances is my point into, what's the best way to do that? And I think we just need to all get together and list them out. Here are the options that we could do, what makes sense. And I believe the county is doing that with best practices from the different entities, because some have clawbacks. Riverton's agreements have a clawback in them. Not overly solid. It's not like, okay, I can come into your business and I can pull that asset out tomorrow. It just says I have the rights to do that. So it's a little bit different than having it in the contract. So, no.
One other thing.
Yeah,
So
please.
when in terms of economic development, you create a business, you would think that you would hire people, which would create jobs and everything, but what if they do this, they don't hire anybody and they're running the business by phone and appointment? And then secondly on that, how do you weigh out if say they have no employment or anything like that, how do you weigh out how much they ask for on the 0.5% sales tax? Because the only thing they're going to be bringing back in is tax revenue for, the city.
Mhm.
How do you weigh out what they're taking from the 0.5% sales tax versus how much they'll be able to bring back by running their business in tax revenue per se?
Okay. Yeah. Good question again. So first thing regarding the grants is this verbiage here, right? That in order for any entity in Fremont County to issue these grant funds to an entity, it has to retain or increase employment. So if there's no jobs, then the only thing left there has to be a net gain of money into the community. If it doesn't meet either one of those criteria, you can't. I mean, it's not going to be, like I say, it's illegal. Maybe you could comment on that. But it's likely not going to be, right? It has to meet that criteria to move that forward. So that would be that portion of it. And then as far as what's the impact to the community? So we've asked a similar question. We said, okay, of all these monies that have been distributed, how much benefit have we received as a county, right? I mean, if it's zero, we're doing the wrong thing. If there is a significant gain, then my recommendation is to keep doing that, right? Is to continue to increase that. So we as a group went out to each of the recipients that have received the monies across the county, from Du Bois to Shoshone, and we gave them a survey that said, okay, how many jobs have you retained or created? What's the net inflow of cash for your business? Is there any increase in revenue, for example? So they completed those surveys as well as a couple other questions, and we've contracted with the University of Wyoming to run the analysis and tell us what's the economic impact, right? I don't know. I mean, I guess off the top of my head, you could guess, and we probably have two different numbers, but we're going to go to them and they're going to complete that, which should be done by the end of this year. That's what the contract says, by December 31st. And then we'll have those numbers that we can look at and say, hey, here's the true economic impact to our community. Are we willing to forego that going forward if we don't renew this? And maybe the answer is yes, maybe it's no. We need to look at that and make the assessment and say, how can we maximize that return on this investment? I'll just say, I think it's a great opportunity for our county. One thing I hear through WIDA, through the business council, and actually even the mayor of Powell, he had told me directly, he said, Fremont County is a shining example of what can happen on the entrepreneurial side and helping economic development for their citizens and their communities. And I think a large part of that is due to the sales tax that we have in place. We have an additional tool in our toolbox that other communities do not have. And we need to maximize the benefit of that tool. Thank you.
Yeah, good questions, and thank you. Everybody else is good? All right. We appreciate your time.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item C, discussion concerning proposed ordinances for staff bonding requirements and defining entertainment for purposes of bar and grill liquor licensing. Rochelle.
Thank you. Council President Cox. So I included these in your packet to start a conversation. They are by no means complete. They have typos, they have dangling participles, things of that nature. But I'll just start with the first one. They're both ordinance 23X because they don't have anything assigned yet. But in terms of bonding for employees, I know when we were going through some of that public officer training, many municipalities and statutes actually require some more bonding requirements, and we could take a look at that. So our current section 12-2-7 requires our municipal judge to have a bond. Our city treasurer is required to have a bond, and they do. Our municipal court clerk also has a bond, but there are a lot of other employees that have access potentially to city funds that aren't required to be bonded currently. So it's conversation as to whether or not the council feels or desires to increase the scope of bonding. And for example, I'm an alternate signatory. If the mayor or Shari isn't around, I could be bonded. The mayor should be bonded. I don't know if you want the deputy treasurer to be bonded. He obviously runs payroll and does accounts receivable. We have a utility clerk that takes cash. We have an employee down at the Parks and Rec building that also deals with cash. So it's just a question for the council members to start thinking about. Other municipalities, like I said, do have a number of other employees required to be bonded. The bond, I believe right now for you, Shari, is $10,000, and the city of Lander pays for the bonds. And is it $100 a year for a $10,000 bond? Do you know?
I think it's $100,000 and it costs $950 a year renewal.
For your bond?
Mhm.
Okay, I thought I looked it up, but I thought it was less than that. So that's question number one. The second proposed potential ordinance deals specifically with bar and grill licenses. So Wyoming statute 12-4-413 allows for a bar and grill license on renewal. They're required to split out their alcohol sales from their food sales. And there was a change recently that allowed them to split their alcohol sales, their food sales, and entertainment. So that statute defined entertainment, as I have it rough drafted in, to read, for the purposes of this section, entertainment means any activity designated to provide diversion or amusement, regardless of the age required for the activity. Entertainment shall not include adult entertainment or gambling. So that comes straight out of the Wyoming statute and is specific only to entertainment as it's relates to bar and grill licensing and their allocation of what percentage of sales came from what. The Wyoming statute specifically left definition of adult entertainment to the local licensing authority, which is you. So I put it out there this year when we're doing liquor license renewals. None of our bar and grill licenses to date have put any funds. They put $0 under that entertainment breakout. So we haven't seen any of that yet, but something certainly that council may want to address going forward as to what that will mean in our locality. I'm trying to look at my notes to make sure that I have everything here. I have provided you with 3 examples illustrating what Sheridan, Cheyenne, and Douglas have done in terms of defining these, and I'm happy to research and find more, but just wanted the council to start discussing and thinking about what you think that should look like for us. The other thing in that proposed resolution, I would like to point out that on 2-2-6 grounds for suspension, our current resolution and ordinance talks about grounds for suspension, and it talks about it as violations of by the holder of any provisions of this title or Title 12 of the Wyoming statutes, and Title 12 is the entire alcohol division, Battle of Wax. So we have a current license holder that has a sales tax hold, and they've had that sales tax hold since October 2nd. And I've reached out and Kevin has reached out numerous times, and that is a violation. However, our current rules don't go into great depth about how that might look. So my proposed language is something that you might consider adding as well. I'm trying to find the right paper. So in that section 2-226 grounds for suspension, I would propose potentially adding a C and a D that goes through receipt of the clerk of a notice of a sales tax delinquency, and then how they get notified of a hearing and what that might look like. You will have a hearing potentially in January. I will send her certified notice of the hearing this week. I've had our city attorney review it. And we'll see where that goes. Questions?
Any questions for the council? Okay. And thank you for getting this in our packets early so that we have an opportunity to review and look up those ordinances as well. Is anybody interested in further examples from other communities that have defined adult entertainment? There's 3 examples already available to us.
And I would like to reiterate that the definition of adult entertainment in this context would be specifically for bar and grills and their ability to proportion part of their sales in that fashion.
Right.
It wouldn't be for adult entertainment for any other purpose, right? Unless the council did something different.
Thank you. All right. Now, discussion concerning greenhouse gas emissions goals. Do we have somebody that's presenting? Please.
Yeah, Council President Cox, my understanding, I thought was Regine might present for staff on this. So Lance, we might lean on you in Regine's absence to have the staff perspective on this process too. Thank you.
Okay. So I would guess that initially there's some questions from the council specifically in reference to any concerns, and then questions and answers. If we could just make it, as formal as possible, just to ensure that everybody is heard and then questions are answered. Great. Yes, there's a question from somebody who's attending via Zoom in reference to interfacing and interacting with council. Work sessions are designed always for information for the council specifically. And so there's not an opportunity for interaction with those in attendance, but it's rather information gathering. So I hope that clarifies that concern. And really, this is an opportunity for us as a council to really get all the information that we need as we move into business meetings and those sorts of things. So thank you for the question, and I hope that answered it. Okay, go ahead, Councilwoman Stubble.
Thank you, Council President Cox. And if I could just add to that we do take public comment at our business meetings. So at our next business meeting on second Tuesday of December, we would take public comment. And of course, we always welcome emails, calls, texts, communication in between meetings as well. Council President Cox, on the matter of this proposed resolution for setting forth the greenhouse gas emissions goals for the years ending in 2030 and 2040, I know that this council has had a presentation from our very dedicated volunteer group of the Energy and Environment Task Force in October. We have had constant, in fact, very helpful informational sessions from this Energy and Environment Task Force, who's worked closely in partnership with staff in developing this resolution. Yeah, I want to underscore, I think, the amount of staff time that have gone into making sure this is a proposal for us to consider as a council to vote on at our next session, but that this is something that could work for the city. I would emphasize that this is about cost savings. in so many ways. The task force has provided an incredible analysis of where our municipal operations produce greenhouse gases and where there are opportunities to reduce, where our municipal operations produce greenhouse gas emissions, and that the majority of those, when you look at it, are coming from buildings and facilities, from our electrical and our heating use at those buildings and facilities, and that when you think of how do we tackle the reductions of those emissions, that is dollars back in our general fund, because that is increasing the efficiency of those buildings and building, frankly, out appreciating assets. And so the bottom line here is that city has an opportunity, if we set a goal, to really save our taxpayer dollars, and in terms of increasing the efficiency of buildings particularly, but also looking at some of the other sectors too. These types of resolutions are formal statements that will make us much more competitive for grants. There is an incredible amount of money coming out of the federal government. I think we're going to see state possibly offering some as well, to address building efficiencies around energy use. And we have had some success. We've also had some failures in these grant writing, in these grants we've gone after. The competitive applications have set these types of goals to show a commitment to saying, this is something that we are addressing, we are acknowledging a need to reduce emissions, and we are committed to doing so. So the resolution is a statement in support of doing that, and the grant competitiveness that it would grant us, trying to find different words there, I think is something for us to take very seriously in terms of being able to seize some of the dollars that are out there to increase the efficiency of our buildings, to save our taxpayer dollars. So that's the introduction I would provide. I think Lance has been deeply involved, Regine as well, from the city staff, from the city operations side in proposing this. And the task force is here for some technical questions if we want, but I think that this is a time for council to discuss amongst ourselves and discuss with staff particularly well as well.
And sorry, council.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Thank you.
And I will say we have 2 items in your agenda packets. We have both the proposed resolution with the goals included, and then we also have a 2030 municipal greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan, which kind of goes into what we're proposing to reach that 2030 goal. And you'll see a lot of it is that energy efficiency part. But just to brief you guys that those are the 2 items that we supplemented. And then I will just hand out this sheet. And it lists what other communities in our region have done in as far as committing to goals and what those goals are and what goals we set might be competitive to them, right? So make sure that we're setting the right goals so that we can be competitive. So I will just hand these out as we have this discussion as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, do we have any questions to start? Like Councilman Larson?
Yes, first of all, I want to thank Courtney and Randy and Adam all coming over to the office, and I visited with Kara on a one-on-one basis as we've discussed this project. And I also really appreciate the information that Dan brought up here earlier today. You know, I think that's the 100-pound gorilla that's in the 500-pound gorilla that's in the room. You know, is that there's a lot of this stuff that is marginal in my mind as far as the carbon footprint goes. But the thing of it is that like Councilman Stubble was saying, is that in order to be competitive on any of these grants, we've got to show that we're making a real effort to do something with the greenhouse gases. And the projects that I have seen that the environmental and committee has put forward is that they're all just very basic. They're straightforward. They're cost saving measures. There's nothing there that's getting off in the rhubarb there that you're getting into different philosophies and so forth. It's all straightforward stuff. I think that that we need to I just don't see where it's gonna hurt to, look at these and I don't mind doing the 2030, the 2040 guidelines, you know, I'm gonna be dead by then. Good chance, good chance. And I darn sure won't be on the council by that time. And, so, you know, I would just suggest that we really concentrate on the 2030 stuff and look at that and see what can be done there.
Thank you. Yes, Councilman Hahn?
Yes, well, first, I kind of find it amusing that, you know, everybody says they're worried about Lander and where it's going and how it's gonna end up, but yet I only see a few faces every meeting and they don't show up to all the important stuff like budgets, where our tax dollars are going, all of that. And here's a little food for thought, you know, did a little research myself, wood smoke. It results in more carbon dioxide emissions than any of the stuff that you're talking about. It's 2.5 times higher than natural gas. It's 30% higher than coal. So when we're looking at the large picture here, and you look at wildfires, this past year, we've had 52,331 wildfires. In acreage, that's 2,585,100 acres. And that's natural gas burning. You know, you're not harming stuff. You got a little bit of methane coming out of there, a little bit of carbon dioxide, and the rest of it is hydrogen, basically. So, you know, I find it hard in hard times, to look at a big picture of spending money on things that are honestly not as healthy as what everybody's making them out to be, and spending tax dollars and just so we can get grants. You know, I don't like that idea. I'm not into competition, and I'm looking at the goals that are set, and they're much larger cities than Lander. We're 7,500 people. Do you guys like sitting around a fire pit in the summertime or around a campfire and stuff? I mean, I do. I burn wood in the winter to keep warm. I guess I'm part of the problem, and everybody who sits around a campfire in the summer is too. You know, everybody's having a hard time with money, and taxes are going up. Everything is going up, and it's just hard to, you know, look at something like this and be like, well, let's blow some taxpayers' money on this when everybody else is struggling.
Question. Let's go with Councilman Stubble first and then Councilman Martin.
Thank you, Council President Cox. And thank you, Councilman Hahn as well for those concerns. I think I would point out a couple pieces that this resolution is not committing us to spending any dollars. Any of the projects that are possible projects are ones we would, one, seek external funding for through the grants we would then be competitive for, but we would then be approving at that project level. So we're above project level of this decision with this resolution. We're not committing to spend anything at this stage. So I think that's important, number one. And let's go to Councilman Larson. I lost my train of thought on the second piece. Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing that I seen on this, Josh, was that the projects that are proposed are not something just to spend money. It's like these air conditioners on top of this building here, you know, that's 25, 30 years old, and they're theoretically in their death throes maybe. And you know, they're gonna have to be replaced. So why not replace them with something that's more energy efficient? I don't think they're just squandering money to squander money.
No, may I, Councilman Cobbs?
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Hahn.
I wouldn't consider it squandering money. Anything that's, you know, I mean, I'm totally in agreement on everything that's being said. I think if we're taking grants, we're probably going to be paying into that a portion. So yes, we will be paying into it. And I just feel, you know, there's never a right time or anything for this stuff, but now is like not a time. If we're going to take grants, maybe we should be looking at our infrastructure and stuff like that a little deeper Um, I'm having a hard time seeing it because I've done a lot of reading and research as well, and what Councilman Hahn read earlier is definitely the dark side of, they call it the dark green, you know, and it's real. There's a lot of slave labor. There's a lot of things that get overlooked just so people can say they're doing the greater good by saving the earth, you know. I'm not being mean to you guys. My oldest daughter is on your side, you know, and her and I have a lot of deep conversations about this stuff. And I think there's a lot of things that are out of our hands. Forest fires, we can't control them. And that's 2.5 times higher of the carbon dioxide coming from a fire than natural gas, 30% higher than coal, which they use coal to create the components. They have to heat all the stuff, all the, they have to make plastic. You look at anything that's being made, they're using coal as heat or natural gas as heat to make this stuff. We're not fixing the problem by creating more of this stuff. Plus, we can't get rid of it, you know? I'm sorry to be the guy, but
Hang on just a second. Go ahead, Councilman Hahn.
Yes, to tell you the truth, I don't have a problem with a lot of this. A lot of the things I brought up before are just, I think the thing that bothers me is it's one-sided. Nobody ever looks at the side that I spoke about, or I never hear it. I mean, that bothers me. The other thing is in our strategic plan, this is at the bottom, this is a third priority. And that's, I mean, we set kind of rules what we wanted to do. And now we're dipping all the way down in the bottom where we've got quite a few projects ahead of us. And I think and I guess this is for our attorney, agreeing to this, this is set in stone, correct or no?
No.
There's flexibility. This is just this is kind of a guideline, and we're kind of working towards something. And
It's more of a guideline. We're not set in stone.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That was one of my main concerns. You know, one of the things that I think there's a lot of good things here, but like in Jackson Hole, there's some crazy stuff. You know, idling vehicles. I mean, I had a buddy that was up there. He had to go up and he took his mom, and it was 35 below zero, and he goes up there and she's sitting in the parking lot of the hospital or clinic or whatever. And a police officer comes up and told her, "Hey, shut the vehicle off." And she goes, "Hey, it's cold out here." He said, "You shut the vehicle off or I'm gonna fine you." And so the guy I work with, he comes out and his mom's sitting in his frozen car, and she told him what happened. And those are the things that scare me. It's not the introduction. It's opening the door, and something that is pretty cool turns into some kind of mutation like what's up in Jackson Hole. And I mean, to me, that isn't cool at all, because if you look at all of the sure, some of this stuff is, you know, happy and it's pretty cool. But I mean, what we're talking about is huge, and, you know, we're just talking about a little tiny part of it. And that is one of the concerns. And people, to tell you the truth, there's people in town that are thinking, you know, if this goes through, you know, next thing is going to be burning firewood in your because we've already, you know, I mean, there's letters out there saying, hey, you know, particulates and this is, and so it's how far does it go? That, I mean, that's for me. How far does it go? I mean, if this stays innocent and we're doing the best we can and all that, and it doesn't get in the way of all the rest of our projects, I see a lot of this stuff. I just don't want to see it turn into, some of the crazy stuff at Jackson Hall that's what, and a lot of the people believe that too.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other? Did I need to go back to you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
But yes, I do have a comment.
Yes, please.
Always got something to say, but, and I told, these good people here the other day when we were visiting, I says, the one thing that I'm not, I think there's a lot of really good low hanging fruit here that we're working on. But I told them the one thing that I was not, thrilled at all was the electric vehicles. I just don't think they're up for prime time yet. And, that'll be a tough sell for me, if we try and go with the electric vehicles here within the city. Just put that up front, as we discussed here in the council.
Thank you. All right, we'll wrap this up. Councilwoman Stubble, but did you want to have something to say as well? We'll start with Councilwoman. Yes, please. Thank you.
I think I appreciate the comments from folks noting, no system is perfect. We're all enjoying climate controlled. We're all wearing clothes manufactured someplace. We're all going to leave here and drive home. We are all of this world. What we're saying is, let's try to be as responsible with those resources as possible, right? Just like, families are turning down the thermostats because they're watching the gas or electric prices go up. So you do what you can to minimize that. And I appreciate Councilwoman Stubble opening this with the reiteration that this is really largely based on leveraging our taxpayer dollars. Going back to what Kevin Krishishnik said, this is a way to leverage that with external funding that's really important for us to be as responsible as possible with our taxpayer dollars. I've said this before, I'll keep saying it. It slays me that every billing cycle we see $16,000 to Rocky Mountain Power for all of our facilities. I would love to see that be less. And I think all of our taxpayers would appreciate that. If we didn't have grant funding for the water tank project, $13 million, every single tap holder in Lander would have a $3,900 bill to cover that. $13 million divided by 3,300 tap holders. That's what we'd get. But we've got grant funding for that. And Lance, how much is the city of Lander is paying for that $13 million tank?
Right now, nothing.
Bingo. So that's what I'm looking at in this opportunity. If we can take care of what we know are degrading infrastructure and inefficient buildings and leverage that, as we just heard, is the importance of economic development, that's a win.
Thank you. That's a great comment. Good discussion. Councilwoman Stubble, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Thanks, Council President Cox. I mean, I think at this stage, we're usually looking for the this resolution to go onto our agenda for a vote at our business session. I'm certainly in support of seeing it move forward into that debate and to vote on it. And I'd be voting yes in that business council session, or business session, I should say, as well. I think of the 2 points that want to be raised, I just want to summarize a little bit more. So we are setting in this resolution, we are saying, hey, we're going to try our best to reduce some greenhouse gas emissions from our municipal operations. We are not conditioning or regulating individuals in our city and their own choices. This is solely about city operations, city buildings, city fleets, if possible. And so I want to underscore that fact. And in saying in this resolution, what we're going to do our best. We're going to try to do this. We're not committing to any of these projects. The examples, which are fantastic, are solely that. They are examples of things we might be able to do to reach the goal. And it underscores how achievable they are, frankly, how much, what the cost savings would be as well. But we're not voting on these projects at this point. So to Councilman Larson's great point, electric vehicles, not a sell for you right now. And that's fine, because we're not voting on tonight on electric vehicles. And I know you know that. And Councilman Hahn, I think to your point about where does it end? It ends with us, right? Like the check on this system is this council voting on each of these projects. So If it gets to a point where the community doesn't back us, and we're not uncomfortable, we're not going to say yes to one of these when it comes down to it. But we're not saying that tonight. We're not saying it in December when we actually make the vote either. These are examples for us solely and not commitments. So wanted to add that piece as well. Yeah, it stops with us for us to go through each of these choices, either in budgeting or in setting guidance for staff or when we get to the project level. So I'm a vote yes. Let's take this forward to a vote at our next session. Not
thank
a
you.
vote, but a head nod.
Yeah. And thank you for being here. We do appreciate all the time that you've put into it. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Just as for us in the process, so as far as the resolution you have in front of you, if you wanted to make any changes to what you see in front of you, does that need to happen before the next meeting in December 12th, or when does that happen?
Yes, that would need to happen before, it will need to get to Rochelle, correct? The Thursday prior to that 12th. So that's the 8th, 7th of December, 7th of December. It would need to be to her at the beginning of the day, ideally.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
So, Council President,
Yes.
so could I suggest that we just stick with the 2030 goals rather than try to reach out to the 2040?
Is council okay with just doing the 2030 goals, or is there objection to that, or?
Council President Cox, I was actually going to go the opposite direction and add language, suggest we add. So it's right now it's 20% emissions reduction by 2030, 50% by 2040. I was going to suggest we add 80% by 2050. It's pretty industry standard. And so in terms of being highly competitive and looking like we're in line with a lot of other communities we'd be competing against, to have a 2050 goal, for a variety of reasons, that's the year that a lot of the attempts to reduce emissions, is important to set that year. So I think it would look odd for a lot of our grant applications for us to be silent on 2050, frankly. And I know some staff conversations have happened about including that as well. So I was going to go opposite direction to add 80% by 2050. I think if we ended at 2030, we would reduce that competitiveness, because there would be a lot of questions asked of why aren't you
Because we're
being
dead by
consistent?
then. I'm
Well,
Yeah.
my suggestion would be that we have staff put together. So Lance and Regine, if you could review that resolution and put that together with Rochelle, and knowing what you've heard here tonight and having that prepared for us in our agenda packet. Go ahead.
Sure. Originally, when we did review this, there was a 2050 goal. And I think that a lot of the reason that got removed was because of me, my suggestion, and then allowing you guys to talk about that tonight. When we're setting a goal, that can be your guys' goal and what you guys want to see happen. From our standpoint is enforcing that in staff. I said, what if this group is gone in a few years or whatever that may be? We're always trying to meet whatever resolutions or rules that you guys adopt and make sure we can achieve those. So I felt very comfortable after the discussions that we can do the 2030 goal. I felt the 2040 goal, yes, there's things happening. And we get to piggyback on some other things that are happening around our state, things that are moving as far as cleaner power. It is in electric vehicles. That's what I wanted to make sure too, John. I was very worried, like Chief's going to be out there trying to start his car and, we're not getting going and we're not going to be able to do anything. Technologies will be there at some point in time. So a lot of these 2050 goals are as much as 100%. And that means that you're generating power, or somebody in the state's generating power that's a lot cleaner. And, that's where your gas is coming from, your electricity coming from. A small piece of our stuff was the vehicles. A large piece of that was energy usage. Our lagoons, are we going to be more efficient? Are some of these things going to happen where our long-term partnerships of sending this to Riverton, and treatment's not even happening and Lander happen. So by 2050, a lot could happen. I just wanted to make sure, again, we weren't putting ourselves in the situation of goals that we couldn't reach. So I felt like 2030 and 2040 were both reasonable, and they explained it to me how those things could happen and what efforts we had to put into them. And those are things that are already within our facility management plan. That's replacing things and, insulating things and doing things, as far as the code, not making giant changes, not building our own power generation here yet, or looking at that. You know, if there's opportunity and those grants show up, those will be decisions in front of you guys to decide if that's what we pursue or if we don't. But what we're seeing as far as what Shari and I are looking at, even this $45 million that we're going after in February, they want to know, do we have a plan as far as reducing, our energy usage? And, that's what we need to make sure that we have to be able to mark that box so that we can build. I mean, this is coming down to the water lines, the sewer lines, the roadway. You're getting federal requirements starting to ask, are we checking that box or not? So that's great. What we talked about is maybe a review period. If you want to reset those goals, or if we're meeting those goals every 5 years or whatever it may be, but that's a discussion we had as staff. We left it off for now as the 2050 goal. Wanted to get your guys' feelings as far as what you think the goal should be so that we can help follow those goals, make sure that we're meeting them and do what's required.
Okay, that sounds good. And I think reviewing that, getting that into our agenda packet, and then having opportunity for comment and then vote on December 12th. Thank you, Lance, for your comments, and thank you again for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yep. All right, discussion concerning the golf course lease renewal. Who's in charge of that discussion? All right, hearing none, we're moving on. Go ahead, Lance. Yep, you're up. You
I
just
just
took-
put candy in my mouth because I wasn't planning on talking. So this is just our updated lease. If you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer any questions. This is incorporating the membership, everything that's happened, and trying to have a good agreement with the golf course. They've reviewed it, is my understanding. They're okay with it. If you guys have any comments, we can address those. Rochelle had one comment that we needed to address in there as far as taxes. So we'll have that included for the next meeting.
Okay. Perfect. Councilman Larson?
I just, after reviewing that, you talk about a sweetheart deal, $10 a year for, lease on the golf course property, and then we give them another $46,000 to boot. Pretty sweet gig.
We can propose changes. So if you want to figure out what that may be, but we looked at, our maintenance of that golf course or running it. And that's always been the alternative. Do we run a municipal course? Do we figure out what that looks like versus somebody running it for us and maintaining this property? So we figure out that if we put full-time employees into that, if we started putting our resources into that, what does that look like? And would we break even? That Shari and I have always had that discussion. Like, is this, if they ever fail, are we golf course owners and running it? And we have whole other discussions here how to make that thing work at some point, because the federal dollars have been put in that property to purchase it. It's going to either be a park or a golf course, or you're going to have to build another one in kind somewhere else to remove those federal dollars that are in place there. So we're open to discussion. If you guys want to alter or change the agreement, let us know how, and happy to do that.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Councilman Stewart.
Thanks. And so just a question, Lance. I always want to see like the red line version. So are you saying the only changes to this lease from the previous year's lease is the addition of memberships? Are there other changes?
No, there are other changes in there.
Sorry, there are no other changes, or?
No, there are other changes.
There are other changes, okay.
Yeah, yeah, just small changes here and there. I
Okay.
don't think Adam's reviewed everything yet. Yeah, so he'll look at it legally, but do you have specific questions?
No, not at all. And you say small changes, something substantive then?
Yeah, I think, just what happens with equipment, what happens if they fold, removing some of the previous language as far as breaking down all the individual like ownership of small things, but more so talking about the clubhouse and how money is going to work, the dollars that we'll put in. It's trying to address all of those things that are going on now, and then permissions and how they move about their processes.
Okay, thanks. I can pull up the previous year's lease. If you have a track changes version of this, I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
Thank you. If
I don't.
Is that a-
This was done on a roadway to Grand Junction at one point, I believe. So I should have track changes, but we can go back.
That's okay. I'll look at the previous
Okay,
years and
sounds good.
do a side by side. Thank you.
Yeah, we can compare them and get you the two copies and changes.
Thank you. All right, last but certainly not least, LIDA presentation, if you guys could come on up. I know you have a couple things you'd like to share. All of you can. Michelle, okay. Thank you, Jenna. Okay.
This one?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I've only got 58 or 60 slides, so this should go real fast. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have any slides. I am here representing LIDA today, just to give you guys a heads up on our recommendations next meeting, and what you'll be hearing from us, likely from Eric Andrews, who's usually here but couldn't be here tonight. The LIFT program, we think is well intended. I think economic development as a whole has a broad support of voters as far as economic development goes. And there does seem to be an opportunity here to make sure that the LIFT program itself is managed in such a way that meets the expectations, not only of the applicants, but of the community as a whole. At this time, it is our opinion that that isn't being achieved. And so we're going to suggest that the LIFT spending be paused for the next quarter. Any questions?
That was
That's-
succinct and to the point.
That's what I got.
Are there any questions?
Jenna, how many applications did you LIFT process?
6 applications this past round. Those will be presented with scoring. I think one actually scored very high and will be recommended for funding for this past quarter. It's just, we're not seeing the robustness of applications. I think some of that is timing. The economy as a whole is in a recession. I think if everybody was making money, we wouldn't hear so much negative feedback about these LIFT grants, but it is what it is. So the people that are applying are people that generally already have businesses started or money in their pockets. So that's just the nature of our current economic scene.
If I may, so just to clarify, so there were 6 applications. One has a recommendation for funding out of LIFT.
I believe 1 or 2.
Okay, so a handful. And you're recommending that we are going to pause future funding then?
Correct, for
Okay,
the
thank
next
you.
quarter.
Thank you.
Mhm. To give us time to have a more focused spending plan for that remaining half-cent money. We do think the half-cent sales tax is very valuable. I think transportation is very valuable to our county. But right now, there's not enough of a focus for Lander in our spending process for the remainder of those funds. And we have a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders now. We've had Kevin already speak tonight, and we have the community review that we're hoping to get that process started to really focus Lander's goal to make that money, make money for us.
It's good. Councilman Larson?
Yeah, I'm just throwing this out to anybody. Do we have any time frame that that we can hold on to these funds without dispersing them?
I asked Eric that specific question earlier today, and he said no.
Councilwoman White?
Thank you. To answer your question, Councilman Larson, there is actually in the MOU between the county and the municipalities, there is a timing restraint there that if funding has not been allocated, and I can't remember all the details of that, then another entity could request those funds for other projects. Or it could be in any number of things. Yeah. So but I believe it's something like, well, I shouldn't speak without having the facts. I'm in the data free zone. There is a time limit, and we all have access to what that MOU is, and we can go back to that. To this particular presentation, I would say thank you. I appreciate the rigor that LIFT and LIDA are doing. That was one of our concerns before of, can we better clarify the funding award matrix to show that just because you got points in the previous iteration of that, it made it look like you were still eligible to get some degree of funding. And I think what we're seeing is, and I think this is great, I think it's being responsive to community concerns that it's not just any business, it's not just any job. There are tight level of wages, like bringing in more minimum wage jobs is not economic development. I actually, as that conversation with Kevin offline earlier about, what is that bare minimum threshold? And generally what he is saying is that needs to be a 17.5 per hour job is the bare minimum type of thing. There've been a number of suggestions about eligibility and what kinds of projects that I think are great that we're being more discreet in what kinds of funding are awarded. So thank you. It's both a challenging move to take, and I think it's one that my hope is that the public will say, good, that actually grows confidence in the public that we're going to be very particular in how funds are allocated for that.
I just have a couple of comments. I want to thank Lita. I know this has been an interesting discussion for some time. And understanding the separation of Lyft and Lita and the complex relationship that has caused and created, but also, really trying to get ahead of communication. And I think that one thing that we talked about at our Lita meeting was making sure that all the council members were aware of what would be happening or what recommendations would be. So there would be opportunity to respond and to be prepared for those types of things. And so I do always appreciate being transparent and ahead of the game. So thank you for staying for the 2.5 hours to give us your recommendation. But
My pleasure.
Councilwoman Stubble, go ahead.
Thanks, Council President Cox. Just two things. I had the MOU up for another reason, so I'll just answer that question. So the funds collected need to be obligated or spent by the general election in 2024. So it's not a distribution by month or anything like that. Jenna, how long of a pause will be recommended? What's the end date?
For this recommendation, just 1 quarter, and
quarter.
I'm not sure what'll happen after that.
Okay.
It's really just to give more time to focus on that economic development plan. I don't know if it can be done in a quarter, but for now, that's all we're asking.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's a really good point to reiterate that Lita is looking into more strategically what their role is for us as a community, as well as utilizing all of these other resources that you've heard a little bit about tonight on the periphery of really expanding on, optimizing those resources to benefit us long-term, generate revenue in our community, as well as other aspects of economic development. So they're moving in that direction of really being strategic in how this can move forward. So thank you. All right, is there any, Regine? Yeah, coming in after your other meeting.
I had to say this one piece. No, that's not true. I just want the council to recognize that the LIFT committee is not represented in the room, and I realize Lita's on the agenda, but I would love that 3-month pause, and I know you guys will do your due diligence to include conversations from both of those committees.
Well, I think that's a good point. I think what the difference is that we will hear the recommendations, and obviously council always has the opportunity to, as we did last time, go through and vote accordingly. But Lita wanted to let the council know where they stood at this point and what their thoughts are moving forward. And it is a balancing act of, it's an interrelationship with Lyft and Lita.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't always worked swimmingly. It's been a little complicated to navigate exactly whose role is what, specifically from the council perspective. I think more so than from Lyft and Lita. I think the council understanding who's doing what and why has been a little bit more complicated than the two committees themselves. So yes, that's well taken, but I think that this opportunity is just them saying, hey, this is where we see where we're at Lita wise, not necessarily Lyft wise. Yeah, Shari? Oh, Clef, Shari, and then.
Because I want to
Councilmember.
remind you that the last time, this was 6 meetings for this volunteer committee to give their recommendations. Tomorrow night, we're meeting because we've scored everything. That will be 4 meetings. So these are volunteers that are giving up a lot of hours every quarter, 4 to 6 meetings. So they definitely should be able to come to the table.
And When you say come to the table, you mean come to the table with your recommendation at the next council.
To at least be heard, yeah. But even the people that sit through these, I mean, come to pitch night, they're giving up a night. All of these people are all professional people with full-time jobs. They're giving up their evenings, and that's a lot of meetings in a short amount of time that we have to do the evaluations and the scoring. And so I definitely think that they should actually be able to give their opinion on it.
Sure. Thank you.
And to be clear, the recommendations for this past quarter that they've sat on and spent time will still be moving forward. Just pausing for next quarter is what we're suggesting.
Yeah, so this current
Right.
is not being paused. It's into the next quarter.
Correct. What is our suggestion?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not the current applications.
Okay, because when they came to lift, that's not how it came across. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That was good. Yes, Councilwoman White.
Thank you. Two things. Yes, we are so deeply indebted both to Lyft and LIDA, again, all volunteer boards for an extraordinary number of ongoing hours to review this. And I think we all remain very appreciative of that. I would also say a nice, I guess a side benefit of the pause is it gives us opportunity to see what the county has found in terms of best practices and give us opportunity to learn from that, as well as hopefully from the UW review of how, where is the best leverage happening. So hopefully we can have even more data to inform us with how we move forward.
Yes, great point. All right, any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is a marathon meeting, and if staff have anything? We don't have to have a motion to adjourn.
Melinda, one thing Lance and I were talking about, I wonder what that cost for them to do that evaluation. Because, you know, our progress reports asked for the people to say how many jobs, how much revenue, if we could have piggybacked with them, or if it was something that we could use as economic development money for, to just pay for the ones that we've already done, to see what kind of a benefit we would be getting back.
Yeah, go ahead. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind coming on up to the. Just get up here and introduce yourself.
I wasn't going to do this. I'm Sarah. I have a little bit of, I also sit on the Fremont County PAC as a leader representative there. So in terms of that economic impact study, we did pull a bunch of information from the progress reports, and then did individual reach outs, which with each of the awardees, we had about a 70% return rate. So we heard both in progress report and then also from UW had a couple of specific questions that they wanted. So we had to like reword some of them.
Thank you. All right. Well, let's thank you again. And yeah, we might as well. Thank you all, and we will see you later.